Hello, sixth graders. Welcome to sixth grade math dividing fractions lesson. Pause while you write the lesson title in your interactive student notebook. Pause again while you write today's lesson objective in your interactive student notebook. Today's objective is I can divide fractions by completing practice problems with 100% accuracy in multiple attempts. Today, the Arizona State Standard we'll be working on is interpret and compute quotients of fractions using visual fraction models and equations to represent the problem. Let's take a look at example 1, writing reciprocals. First, let's look at the study tip off to the side. It says when any number is multiplied by 0, the product is 0, so the number 0 does not have a reciprocal. So the reason for that is because you can't divide something by 0. So be sure you write this in your notebook so you won't get confused. So letter A, our original number is 3/5, and so it's a fraction is 3/5, and its reciprocal is 5/3. And we check it by multiplying the reciprocal in the original number. 3/5 times 5/3 equals 1. So if you remember from doing your vocabulary, a reciprocal is the number that you multiply a number by to get 1. So that's why the check looks like that. Letter B, 9/5, we multiply that by 5/9 and we get number 1. Letter C, 2. So 2 as a fraction, remember any whole number is itself over 1. So 2 is 2 over 1. And so its reciprocal is 1/2. 2 over 1 times 1/2 equals 1. So a reciprocal, if you have A over B, its reciprocal is B over A. We just flip the fractions, so reciprocal. So be sure you're understanding that. We might not always use the word reciprocal because it's a big fancy word, but don't forget what it means because you will see it as you move further down the line in math. Now let's look at our key idea. Remember, when you see the yellow pencil, it means you got to write this down. Dividing fractions. To divide a number by a fraction, multiply the number by the reciprocal of the fraction. So that means you're always taking the reciprocal or flipping the fraction that is on the right. So 1/5 divided by 3/4 equals 1/5 times 4/3. So they took the reciprocal of the fraction on the right. So sometimes we write this as keep, change, flip. So we keep the fraction on the left, we change to multiplication, and we flip the fraction on the right. So when we do that, we end up with 1/5 times 4/3, and we always look to see if we have anything we can divide out, and we don't. And so if they had finished this, it would be 4/15. So we're all simplified. Be sure you write that. Be sure you write how it would look in algebra as well. So write the entire key idea. Pause and take a break and do that. Example 2, dividing a fraction by a fraction. 1/6 divided by 2/3. So we are going to keep the fraction on the left the way it is. And we are going to change the sign to multiplication. And we are going to flip the one on the right. So we're taking the reciprocal. So 1/6 divided by 2/3 becomes 1/6 times 3/2. We divide out the common factor, 3. So 3 goes into itself once, it goes into 6 twice. So then we multiply. 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 times 2 is 4. So our answer is 1/4. Example 3 is dividing a whole number by a fraction. So a piece of wood is 3 feet long. How many 3/4 foot pieces can you cut from the piece of wood? So method 1 is drawing a diagram, marking each foot on the diagram, then dividing each foot into 1/4 foot sections. So if you did that, you would have something that looked like our diagram off to the side here. And then you count off the number of 3/4 foot pieces of wood. So you would have 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can cut 4 3/4 foot pieces from the piece of wood. Method 2, you're dividing 3, because there are 3 feet, by 3/4 to find the number of 3/4 foot pieces. So 3, or 3/1, divided by 3/4. So we keep the one on the left, keep the fraction on the left, we change the sign to multiplication, and we take the reciprocal, or we flip the fraction on the right, so it becomes 4/3. So that's what's happening here. So we're multiplying by the reciprocal of 3/4. So we have 3 times 4/3. So we divide out the common factor, 3. So 3/3 becomes, we cross out the 3's and they each become 1. And so we have 1 times 4, which is 4/1. So that's just a 4. So we're all simplified. So we can cut 4 3/4 foot pieces from our piece of wood. Example 4, dividing a fraction by a whole number. So this is just like example 3, only things are switched around the other direction. So 4/5 divided by 2. We keep the fraction on the left, and then they've added the step of taking the whole number and putting it over 1. So we're writing 2 as an improper fraction. And then we multiply by the reciprocal of 2/1, which is 1/2. So we keep the fraction on the left, we change the sign to multiplication, and we flip the fraction on the right, and then we divide out the common factor, so cross-canceling those common factors out, which makes your math easier and your life easier. So 2 goes into itself once, and it goes into 4 twice. So we now have 2 times 1, which is 2, and 5 times 1, which is 5. So you're all simplified. And finally, don't forget that order of operations always, always, always applies. So we're going to evaluate 3/8 plus 5/6. So we want to just add 3/8 plus 5/6 first, but we need to remember our order of operations. So there's a study tip here about least common denominator, but we'll get to that in a minute because we don't need to worry about adding yet. First, we're going to remember that's an E. We do parentheses first, we don't have any of those. We do exponents second, we don't have any of those. We do multiplication and division left to right. We have division before we're going to do that multiplication. Or I'm sorry, before we're going to do that addition. So we need to worry about the 5/6 divided by 5. So we multiply by the reciprocal of 5, which is 1/5. So the 3/8, we just keep copying it so we don't lose it. And the 5's cancel out. We multiply 5/6 and 1/5, and we divide out the common factor of 5. So that becomes 1/6. So now we've got 3/8 plus 1/6. And it says you can use the least common denominator 24 to add the fractions in example 5. I would say you should, because it will make your simplifying easier. So if you did that, you would have 9/24 plus 4/24, and that equals 13/24. So you skip this whole step because you've used the least common denominator, and then you don't have to simplify. Remember, be sure your notes in your ISN are complete. Remember to complete your Google form questions and to review the lesson if you need to. Complete your Big Ideas math assignment in your math spiral notebook and submit that when it is 100% correct, not before. And please track your progress on your playlist.